Hello, dear viewers of our Stop the Destruction of the World program. Once again, we're here to transmit concepts related to the discoveries in the science of psychosocial pathology. The triological science that is based on the results of many years of work and research by psychoanalyst Norberto Keppe. Our society's goal is to transmit these discoveries so that the effects and symptoms related to the destruction of Earth are not studied only at the superficial level. We go directly to the main cause of these problems, and if this isn't done, there will be no chance of stopping the disaster that will take place on Earth and in humanity. We are already seeing a number of catastrophic events. In this past decade, there have been more deaths related to climatic catastrophes than in all the wars put together. Thousands of people have had to migrate from their land and homes and have been dislocated because of this. And this tendency is for this to get even worse. So I would like to call your attention to these problems and their possible solutions on this conscientization program we are airing. The human being is causing his own destruction by not wanting to address the psychosocial pathology, which is inside first and then brought to the exterior. Dr. Keppe has discovered some incredible and amazing things that must be divulged, and this is why our association makes this effort.
E para isso nós fazemos esse esforço, né? Nossa associação faz esse esforço.
Dr. Keppe?
You remember that in the United States, in 1984, I wrote a book about the decay of the United States and the American people. Take a look here. This is a flag with a fallen eagle, a stylized eagle that has fallen. You will notice that now, in the 21st century, all this decay is appearing. And now this isn't only related to the United States. Humanity needs to become conscious of the main cause, the fundamental cause of the destruction that is taking place on the planet. And although ecologists have been studying this for a long time, they've never looked into the main cause, which is the human being. We have made a comparative study and reached the conclusion that the problems lie in the same issue that religions call sin, evil, the same problems that philosophy sees as related to good and evil are the same in the experimental scientific field. Freud's great discovery came when he noticed that human beings, that is, we who are speaking here and you who are listening there, we are sick and have a divided personality. This that's called schizophrenia, related to people who are institutionalized. Some time ago, it was more common to put them into hospitals, sanatoriums. A person who has a double personality is a person with a division inside himself. We're noticing that this is linked to spiritual and philosophic factors, rather than just say pollution, volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes. All of this stems from the attitude that humans on this planet have. Freud, as I have already mentioned, began to see that the sickest people were the most envious. Now, for those of us who consider ourselves somewhat saner, we have an illness which Melanie Klein called schizoparanoia. It's not exactly schizophrenia. It's a mild form of schizophrenia, but it's still a division in the personality. All of us have destructive attitudes, aggressiveness, these attitudes of internal division that lead us to destroy our planet. So let's look now. I've put up a diagram here related to the consequences of envy. Let's look at what they are.
First, attack everything that is good.
One characteristic of envy is that it's a spontaneous feeling without reason. You can verify this, that the individual thinks he has another feeling. For example, an individual who steals, who wants someone else's things for himself, or someone who attacks a person because he thinks the other is bad. So he thinks he's attacking what is bad. But envy is the most unreasonable feeling of all, because it's simply the desire a person has of not wanting what is good. Saint Basil in the 2nd century said this. He was a saint who was paid homage by the Church. He said that original sin was the sin of envy. Why? Because in envy, the individual doesn't want to be. So in the ancient philosophy of Plato, Aristotle, Parmenides, evil is the privation of goodness. That is, a person who creates evil deprives goodness, deprives himself, of course, and deprives others also. So as I said, envy is a completely unreasonable feeling in which the individual rejects the goodness that exists. That's why in my book, The Origin of Illness, I quoted Rochefoucauld on the first page. Take a look. We need greater virtue to sustain goodness and prosperity than evil fortunes. And what did this French thinker mean by this? That goodness causes a lot more human suffering for people than the suffering linked to sickness and such. Notice that this is contrary to what people normally think. The human being rejects what's good and becomes sick because of this. He is ungrateful with life. Illness doesn't occur as many think, which is that once in a while you get sick. No, human beings are in a dormant state, a latent state of perpetual illness. He is always complaining, always sad, always against everything. This is the state of illness that humanity is in. And since envy is the greatest problem, he not only tries to destroy others, but also his own qualities and gifts, and also all the beauty of his own planet. So, secondly, more consequences of envy.
Not to desire anything better than it already is.
Envious individuals don't want to progress in life. He can have everything he wants, but he rejects, not wanting to get out of the misery they are in. Thirdly,
to destroy as much as possible. Envy is always a behavior of attacking what is good.
Notice that the issue of illness is the same thing that philosophy addresses, and theology too, that of sin. There is a relation. Why is it a sin for an individual to reject goodness? Because this is giving vent to envy and arrogance, to that which is most vile in a person and in society. It's obvious that if an individual steals, he is harmful. but still not as much as the envious person. For example, a person who rises to a powerful position and ends up attacking the whole country. He won't let it develop because he creates bad conditions for everyone. In our work, we make a joining, a junction between experimentation, which is the arts or aesthetics, with thought, philosophy, and theology. Take a look at the diagram.
Without philosophy and theology, human beings can't be balanced.
What I mean is that Freud, up to a point, was very naive to think that human problems would be more medical, and that sexual questions would lead the person to have psychological disturbances. Even if there is some type of disturbance related to sex, which is something the Viennese therapists always mention, but it's not the main cause. The sexual issue goes together with the others, which are more important, such as conceit, envy, the issue of arrogance. So what did Freud do? Take a look at the diagram.
Only those who see their evil intentions have good intentions.
Freud showed us that it's no use to orient, to teach as such, you see, to say, look, my son, my friend, look at this or that, do good, not evil. Evil isn't good. Goodness is what is good. All this advice. To advise and orient doesn't work because it doesn't go to the origin of the problem, which Freud named the unconscious. We call this an attitude of inconscientization. The individual inconscientizes something that he is envious of. By not seeing what causes the envy, by not seeing what he does out of envy, he becomes something painful to others and to himself. This is why people who are very sick cause so many disturbances, not only in the family, but also in society, and to themselves as well. So we'll be right back.
The most original contemporaneous writer in the world today, says the National Scientific Research Center in France. A genuine contributor to the intellectual treasury of civilization, says former U.S. Ambassador Joseph Gogassian. For these times of uncertainty and conflict comes a work of extraordinary vision, hope, and moral clarity. Brazilian psychoanalyst and social scientist Norberto Keppe writes with wisdom and authority about the things that really matter. How to heal illness, how inverted science is leading the destruction of nature, and what to do about it. Finding spirituality within, structuring a truly just society. There are more than 3,000 books published worldwide every day. None are more important than these. The books of Norberto Keppe. Trilogical science, leading us to a new world.
I remember the book Glorification that Dr. Keppe wrote. I was with him many of the nights or days where he got those inspirations from God, and it was a necessity for him to write what he received. So the book was totally written under inspiration. But it's not only a theological book, it's mostly a scientific book. Very therapeutic book. Very beautiful, by the way. And he used to wake up during the night, 2, 3 in the morning, and he said, let's go to the top of the mountain. And we were watching the sky in this dark night with no interference, so you could transcend the sky and see heaven through it. My God, you could adapt the writings that he did with the music of Beethoven, and this would be a trilogy of his writings and the music. It would be heaven.
Norberto Keppe's Glorification, available in the bookstore at stop.org.br.
Então, sendo a Associação Stop a Destruição do Mundo uma sociedade de cunho científico, sempre dedicada ao estudo das causas psíquicas e sociais desse estado de destruição que se encontra ao nosso planeta, nós não poderíamos deixar de fora o que se chama agora da exopatologia, que seriam os problemas causados por seres de outras civilizações, de outros planetas, extraterrestres ou intraterrestres. Por quê? Porque nesse nosso trabalho de atendimento a clientes, são tantas as evidências, são tantos os casos de pessoas que têm envolvimentos com esses seres, que isso, como cientistas, nós temos que tratar desse assunto também.
Many health professionals will be very surprised that we are broaching the subject of exopathology, or ETs, UFOs, sightings, etc. But as scientists, we cannot reject or put these issues aside. There are thousands of people who've had some experience, voluntary or involuntary, with beings from other planets, or have sighted unidentified flying objects. A symptomatology of anxiety and anguish exists about this, and we cannot, under any circumstances, dismiss this as being only the delusion of thousands of people. And we will unite people who have studied this subject in depth and who have credibility in their professions, and let's see what can be developed within this field. Since the academic community, the media, the government, and those in the mainstream are reluctant to address it, then we will.
I would like to remind you of something that Wilfred Bion said. He was perhaps the greatest psychoanalyst that ever came out of England. He said something very important. What is delirium? He said delirium is seeing something that doesn't exist. When the thing that the person says exists doesn't exist. Generally, children create a lot of deliriums. But delirium is also not seeing what does exist. You see. So if there are thousands of spacecraft flying around and we deny that they exist, then we are also in a delirium. So going back to the issue of human beings' pathology, I've put up a number of phrases about how an individual can be in goodness and be happy. Let's take a look. First,
secrets on how to be happy. First, wanting to have less than more.
Can you see how important this is? People always want more and more and more, to earn more, to double or triple his wages. People want more than they have. And if he wants more, it shows us that he is very voracious. For example, with food. If a person isn't able to achieve a certain amount of balance related to what he eats, it's obvious he's going to put on weight and create heart, circulation, and bone problems due to this. Or even considering sex. One can say that the sickest individuals are the ones who are very assertive in relation to sex, those who are so focused on sex, but also those who are completely disinterested. Humanity in general lives for the sensorial, the senses, you see. Even science created this idea that the issue of existence, of the truth, is linked to the senses. If everything can be perceived in the way that is seen, heard, tasted, touched, then it exists. And if we can't sense it, then it doesn't exist. Notice that the greater part of everything that exists, like intuition, telepathy, those who have a more universal vision, and all these other examples of seeing further than the senses, are actually the most important things. The human being has created a very small world for himself to live in, because the senses represent a very small world. On the other hand, the universal, intuition, intellect, vision, all the most profound elements of knowledge are stagnant. And this is why artists are so rejected by society, because they stay kind of outside this purely sensorial environment. Consequently, they aren't fully understood by society. So what does a person have to do to be happy? Take a look in second place.
Never do what one wants to do, but do what one should do.
So the senses always lead a person to do what he wants to. And by being an inferior element, this doesn't produce happiness, only pleasure. People think that through the pleasure of making money, eating, having sex, they will be happy. And they aren't. To do what one wants is to fulfill one's sensorial desires. But to do what one should do comes from the individual who is dedicated at work. You will notice that it's through work, through good action, that the individual renews himself, grows, is interested in what is going on in the world, is happy. Happiness stems from this superior plane, from the psychological plane, which hasn't been given a lot of importance, even though everyone has an extra sensory understanding of it. But we're afraid of expressing it and being labeled as mentally deficient or something like that. For example, in psychiatric wards, those who are institutionalized or who have been there paint a lot of devils. Now, when they paint devils on their canvases, the doctors give them medications to stop seeing things that exist. You see, even if it isn't sensorial, how does one deal with bad intentions if no one listens, if no one sees they exist? Only those who have them know.
This is the great problem in the legal system, where people need material proof to defend themselves from attacks, from crimes, murder. And if there's not a body found, then the system can't prove murder or wrongdoing.
So, let's see in third place, a condition to be happy.
Always put yourself in a more humble position. The relationship between psychopathology and religious orientation.
It's obvious that if the individual puts himself in an inferior position, anything that is better than that will make him happy. Now, if he places himself way up there, up high, he can be the boss, an owner, he can conquer the world, as they say. But he will continue being unhappy. Why? Because he wants too much. And of course, this type of attitude is out of reality. It's a kind of a delirium. So let's look at Augustine's phrase.
Conscientiousness of one's imperfections is part of elevated creatures.
So you will notice that even Freud mentioned this. Freud based all of his work on this hidden part of the human being. So we can say that 90% of us is the inconscientized part. Evil intentions, rage, feelings of envy, and everything else that is negative forms 90% of us. And this 90%, because it is hidden, the person is unaware of it. What does the person perceive? 10% of the world. It's very little. And this is the sensorial world. And this sensorial world is totally secondary in a person's life. So what really generates happiness, accomplishments, well-being, is generally left aside. That is, to do good, good deeds, action which comes from love, which is a fundamental attitude of affection, not only to our fellow man, but in general, to our planet, which is in a very bad situation. Is there anything else you would like to say, Claudia?
I would like to invite our viewers again to access our site because we have a great many activities going on in the Society of Integral Psychoanalysis and the Stop the Destruction of the World Association. They work side by side. And the Stop Association's main goal is to provide more consciousness of how the human being's madness is destroying the planet. If we aren't conscious of this, we won't get another chance. We will simply be saying goodbye, won't we? We will be back next week on the same channel at the same time. See you then.